Hi, everyone. Welcome. Before we get started, I wanted to let everyone know that we have Spanish interpretation today. Tenemos interpretación simultánea para este evento. Para accederla, siguen las instrucciones siguientes. Cuando entra el webinario Zoom, va al controles y hacer clic en Interpretation, seleccionar español y para solo oír español, hacer clic en Mute Original Audio. So my name is Jonathan Lowell. I'm the Engagements and Programs Coordinator for Planet Texas 2050, a research initiative at the University of Texas with the goal of being service towards making the state of Texas more resilient and equitable. We do this by undertaking interdisciplinary research that aims to make societal impact. And as part of that project, we started this panel series, which we call Resilience Roundtables, to bring together leaders across the academic, nonprofit, government, advocacy, and artistic sectors. We organize these with a handful of speakers and a moderator from the Planet Texas 2050 network, with topics that intersect with the issues of resilience, climate justice, disaster preparation and response, biodiversity, environmental humanities, and more. For this academic year, we are calling this Tracing the Flows, a year-long panel series on the ways water contours land and life, and we'll be touching on the myriad ways water shapes our lives. For this iteration, we have brought together a panel of experts and advocates to discuss the before, during, and after the flooding events and the possibilities of diminishing the impacts of these deadly and costly climate-related hazards. Before we begin, I'd like to read the land acknowledgement that was developed by the Program in Native American and Indigenous Studies here at UT. We would like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the indigenous lands of Turtle Island, the ancestral land for what is now called North America. Moreover, we would like to acknowledge the Alabama Cusara, Caddo, Carrizo Comecrudo, Coyawiltecan, Comanche, Kickapoo, Lipan Apache, Tonkawa, and Isleta del Sur Pueblo, and all the American Indian and Indigenous peoples and communities who have been or have become a part of these lands and territories in Texas. In recognition of the ongoing and cumulative challenges faced by Indigenous peoples in Central Texas and globally, we call upon the University of Texas at Austin to repatriate the ancestral remains held by the Texas Archaeological Research Lab to their Indigenous descendant communities and native lands, to commit to the active recruitment and material support of Native American and Indigenous students who currently comprise fewer than 0.2% of UT Austin's student body, to support the transition of the program in Native American and Indigenous studies into a center, and to establish a protocol of research and study on tribal lands, and to foster an ethics and practice of engaged scholarship with and for Indigenous peoples and communities locally and internationally. And with that, I would like to introduce our moderator for today, Dr. Paula Passalacqua. She is a professor of environmental and water resources, imagining engineering in the Massey Department of Civil Architectural and Environmental Engineering at the University of Texas at Austin. Her research focuses on transport processes along river and delta networks, with particular focus on flooding, river floodplain connectivity, and coastal resilience. Dr. Passalacqua is the lead PI on the Southeast Texas Urban Integrated Field Lab, a Department of Energy-funded urban integrated field lab that focuses on the compounding effects of flooding and air pollution on Southeast Texas communities. Additionally, she is the chair of Planet Texas 2050. And with that, I turn it over to you, Paula.
Excellent. So it looks like we can get started. So thanks everyone for joining us, and thank you to our panelists for being here, and thank you for the patience. As I said, it's the first time we do this, the translation, which is very important, and so I'm happy we figured it out. So as Jonathan said, I'm Paola Passalacqua. I'm a professor here at UT in civil architecture and environmental engineering. I work on flooding, and I'm also the chair of Planet Texas 2050. And I'm glad we have this panel. I'm really excited about having our panelists here. Also, it's a blue sky day, but Those of us that lived here remember major flooding events on Halloween. So it's very important to keep talking about these issues. We had a taste of rain last week. We know it has flooded in several locations, so it's important to get prepared for what's to come. And so having said that, I would like to start by having our panelists kind of like introduce themselves and also tell us a little bit in the context of flooding, what keeps you up at night, but also what opportunities do you see and what excites you in particular. And so I'm going to propose an order of Francis, and then maybe we go to Katie, and then we go to Gabriele. Francis. You are muted.
Good morning, everybody. This morning, I want to share a little bit about me first. My name is Francis Acuna. I'm a climate resilience community lead organizer with GAVA, Go Austin, Vamos Austin. And as an organizer, I train residents to anticipate, prepare, and respond to disasters. And as you know, the community members are the first responders most of the time, or should I say all the time. We build leadership for residents to support each other and also to train each other to be prepared for disasters. One of the things that keep me up at night is not knowing if the city is really going to pull through in the response efforts, because a lot of the times I want the residents to feel proud of the city, of the city's response, in order for there to be a true leadership and build that trust in community and the city. But also what keeps me up at night is, whenever there's rain, the lightning, thunder, and that whenever it doesn't stop falling. And in my mind, all that comes through is go to the pond and make sure that the water is not overflowing. Make sure that residents are not in danger of flooding and the water's going into their homes. There's always an opportunity to work with the city and with residents. I think the most important is the communication. Make sure that we have a plan and be active on accountability, transparency, and trust building for both the city and the community whenever we are working together. What excites me the most is whenever I call residents. For example, the last time that we flooded, I called them and I was panicking. I think for the first time, I literally panicked. And I called the residents to make sure that they were okay, that they were prepared, and if they weren't, what they needed. But I was already crying because I was worried and panicking. But once I talked to them, I was crying because I was happy, because all the residents said, I already have my backpack in the car. I already sent my grandma to my brothers and sisters, or my kids went with their dad or with family members. So that was one of the greatest feelings that you could ever have, because that tells you that you are doing your job and that you are being impactful, when most of the time you don't hear it because you're too busy working.
Okay, so we're going to move forward, and I'm going to pass it to Katie.
Yes, thank you, Paula. I have a slide that's going to help kind of our introduction for myself. Hopefully you all can see it. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Katie Landry-Guyton. I am the Senior Service Hydrologist for the National Weather Service office in Houston. We have 122 weather forecast offices across the country. Most of those do have a hydrologist or a river forecast center that will support those offices. You may or may not know this, but the National Weather Service is the official source for flood forecasts and warnings that are meant to protect life and property. So what does this mean? We issue forecasts and we issue warnings for flash flooding, riverine flooding, coastal flooding, storm surge, all of this to keep you and the community safe. The way we communicate flood potential varies. It depends on your role and where you stand within the community, but we do try to make sure that we're communicating with everyone. Some of the ways that we communicate these forecasts and warnings are through watch and warning polygons that notify emergency managers, local officials, the media. Some of these warnings will scroll on the bottom of news stations. Some of the warnings will trigger your cell phone through the wireless emergency alerts. Another way that we are communicating our forecasts and warnings are through our official products. So some of those products include the river hydrographs that you might have seen across portions of Texas or the United States. Along with river hydrographs, we also have inundation mapping services, which basically put water on a map and help you to see where you could potentially see flood impacts from those forecasts. And the beautiful thing is that all of these services are always evolving. And then we provide briefings to emergency managers and local officials to make sure that they are making the right decision to help communities make the right decision. And a lot of this is also shared on social media. So we're trying our best to communicate this with the public. But what keeps me up at night is that are people actually taking action with the information we're providing? Even if we're communicating all of this information to the best of our ability, are people able to make the right decision or have the resources to make the right decision? The other piece that keeps us up at night is the uncertainty part. We know good and well that meteorologists are right all the time, which is actually not true. We do our best, but we are limited to many uncertainty pieces. And so trying to convey that and help people make the best decision is very difficult. And then also making sure communities are using trusted sources. I mentioned that we're the official source, but there are other trusted sources out there that are helping us communicate the message. But I will say the thing that most excites me about all of this is that we continue to improve the science, the technology, the communication of all of the products and services that we're putting out. And we do this through leveraging our resources with partners, increasing our partnerships, as well as gathering feedback from the community. And that's what we're hoping to get out of this today. And as we continue to go forward, is hearing from the community on what's working and what's not working. And with that, I'll pass that back over to you, Paula.
Thank you, Katie. So I'm going to go to Gabriele then for the third answer.
Thank you, Paula. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me here. My name is Gabriele Villarini. I am a professor in civil and environmental engineering and the High Meadows Environmental Institute at Princeton University. I just moved here over the summer. Before then, I was at the University of Iowa for about 15 years between the faculty and being a student. The reason why I bring the University of Iowa to this conversation is because, you know, tying to what Paula asked about what worries us, what opportunities are, I'm a hydroclimatologist. I'm interested in the connection between the climate system and hydrology and trying to follow the rain, in a sense, from the sky down to the basins and the outlets. And I was finishing up my PhD at the University of Iowa in 2008 when we had a major flood event which impacted large areas of the eastern Iowa, including the University of Iowa. At that time, the one thing that we could do was to prepare was sandbag, help create the sandbags that then would be deployed to build levees. And it's that kind of event that really got me interested in understanding how we got to that point. What are the, could we predicted this? And if so, what lead time, what were the processes, but also what does it mean for the future? how do we incorporate that kind of events in the design of more resilient infrastructure? How do we, was it just a fluke, or was it just a manifestation of a new norm with which we have to wrestle? And so this ties to the things that keep me up at night, as well as the opportunities, because as we design for the future, many of the guidelines upon which we rely, they are built to design for the past. So we look at what happened in the past and we assume that the past will manifest itself again in the future. But what if that's not the case? What if the future is going to be very different from today? We're still going to build today for structures that are going to be up for the next 50 years, but they might reflect the past understanding of how the water might move on the landscape at a given location. And so to me, I see this both as a something that keeps me up at night, but also as an opportunity. We are primed now to be able to incorporate changes in the future design. And so I see that as a very viable and valuable opportunity to do better in our design towards more resilient infrastructure. And this ties back to what Francis mentioned from earlier on, from a community perspective, and Katie from preparedness against these events. So thank you, Paula. Back to you.
Excellent. Yeah, so there's a lot of things that the three of you have said that, you know, spark a lot of questions, and we'll see how many we can fit here. But I want to start with talking about communication that has come out a lot in what the three of you have discussed. And I wanted to ask you, in your opinion, what is the best way to establish a dialogue with communities, especially around issues of flooding and flood risk? And how do we make sure that the correct information really reaches our communities? And I'm going to start with Katie, then we go to Gabrielle, and then to Francis.
Yeah, that's a great question. So for decades, we have worked off of a mission-oriented, where we focused on briefing emergency managers, and then the emergency managers were the ones that reached out to the community. And we've learned that you know, yes, that's a great way to do it as the scientist, but we've learned that the best way to communicate with communities is to get the information directly to the communities, as well as the emergency managers, to help them make sure everyone's talking off of the same sheet of music. That's why when we do briefings now for tropical events or other big weather phenomena, we will record these briefings with emergency managers and then share those briefings on YouTube so people can actually listen to them, and they're translated so that people have the same information that the emergency managers have. But we also have to make sure that we're getting the warnings and all of the information in a timely fashion, and that people also know what to do with that information. And that's the piece where I think we still have room to grow, is to help people make better decisions off of the information we're sharing.
Francis.
It is, communication is one of the most important things for me, because I work in the community, and knowing the audience and building trust by being transparent is very important. When the city comes to the community or they send messages, we have to know what the community or the population that we're talking to, the culture of the people, what kind of language are they used to, the language jargoning. We need to lower that to community or more simple wording whenever we send messages or whenever we talk to residents. We ensure the communication can reach residents by having open, transparent communication and being honest with residents. By also by, if we're doing anything by media, we have to make sure that we do that by going to the media means that residents are used to. For example, we can go, if the city goes to Facebook, not everybody follows that certain department. So you have to go like Telemundo, whatever residents are used to in the sense of media means. It's also very important that residents build their capacity to learn the tools so they could be able to communicate that information to their neighbors or to their friends and their families in order for them to be better prepared. And but of course, we can't do that without the mental health. If we don't know the kind of mental health that a disaster impacts on residents, it kind of throws everything off when you're trying to communicate something and we're not being sensitive to the needs and to the trauma that the winter storm or the flood or the fire or anything like this. All of these climate events are happening in the communities. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Francis. Gabriele?
Yeah, so the main thing I will add to everything that has already been said is related to how we perceive the communities and what they have to offer. What I mean is, from an engineering perspective, we can come up with the best technological solution to a problem. But A, is this the problem the community want help solving? And B, is it possible for them to implement whatever technical solution we come up with? Also, the local communities, they have local knowledge that can be helpful in incorporated whenever we come up with potential solutions. They have either already experienced it and found it not working, or they might have something that we don't think about because maybe it's not in our standards and guidance. And so one of the things, and I think over the recent years, there has been more of a paradigm shift where earlier on it was more of a top-down technological approach where engineers would go into the communities, they would give them an answer or a solution. Off you go. While now it takes more time, and I heard before talking about trust, you have to build the relationship with the communities. You need to listen to what they say and be able to incorporate their needs, within the technological constraints, don't get me wrong, but incorporate that view and needs into the design or into the project that you're working on. So that's, I would say, Paola, is my...
Yeah, great. And actually, I want to continue on that, and I'm probably going to continue with you, Gabriele, because I want to, and then I'll get to Francis and Katie. I want to talk about uncertainty, and that's something that all of you have mentioned. And it's usually difficult to talk about uncertainty. I have that same issue myself with my flooding work, but it is true that our work now, and I'm speaking as an engineer right now, and we're really looking at designing under uncertainty. And so I want to ask all of you, as a professional and as a person also, because we're also residents that deals with flooding, how do you think about uncertainty and how does it impact your work specifically? And I'll start with you, Gabriele.
Yeah, no, and I think Katie introduced this. I think, Katie, you said that all meteorologists think they're always right, and which, we can debate, and obviously it's that's one of the issue with uncertainty, is that we will never know for sure what the true answer is until it's too late. And we also have different sources of uncertainties, different capabilities of reducing uncertainties. if we think about, say, climate change, we will not know on which scenario, along which trajectory we'll be moving until it's too late. And so we have those issues. We have uncertainties related to the fact that the climate system, regardless of how well we can model it, it's chaotic in nature. And so some of those uncertainties will always be irreducible. And there are others of which we can work towards reducing. The problem becomes their quantification, which we don't always do, or we don't always do appropriately. But also recognizing what does the end user want out of a project, out of a study? Do they want to know the uncertainties associated with the estimate, or do they just want a number? And there is nothing wrong with one way or another. This is not a judgment, it's just related to the needs. And this goes back to what we discussed before as far as communication. What is it that you want, and how do you want it communicated? And so we can, some folks that just want, give me your best number, don't worry about the uncertainties. Some others, they need to know how solid of a number they're working with. Issues are related to the kind of outcome of a project, what the impacts are. And so it's a really complex problem, Paula, but it's one for which I don't think there is a single answer, but rather a spectrum depending on your final outcome and the people with whom you are interacting and working with.
Francis, would you like to go next on uncertainty? Now we go to Katie.
Yes. Well, I know if we're not sure what's going to happen, for example, 10 years ago today, actually, 2013, we got flooded, and there was so much uncertainty. And right now, whenever there's chances of flooding, we go through the same thing. There's that uncertainty of, is this going to get any better? Are we going to be able to respond? Are residents going to be able to be ready and be safe at the same time, not lose their belongings, not lose their homes? And it's hard when we go through that. But but we are working on hopefully having standing orders for resilience hubs to be open for extended events. And we need to have those buildings equipped with basic supplies, and just like we did in the past, right? We needed the water, the food, the mattresses, or the beds and all of that was needed, blankets, diapers. These resilience hubs need to be ready for extended stays, not only for overnight or for during the heat or during the cold, but they need to be ready in case we have another 2013 flood. And also, residents need to be prepared to respond to disasters. It's so critical that residents know what to do in case this happens, because we know that we are the first ones to respond to our neighbors, to our family. So that's part of the plan that we hope we have for sure for the next disaster. There's, for all of us to know, city and residents to know where there's a donation drop-off, where they could get resources, who is giving medical support, or how can they get that support. The expectation of the city, not to let resources fall apart, but if they do, is there a plan, or a plan B, should I say, for the city to reduce failure, but also for the city to respond to failure? This didn't work well So is there a plan B so we could be able to fix it?
Great. Katie.
Yeah, so both of my fellow panelists have made great points. I think professionally, there are two prongs to handling uncertainty going forward, especially with perspective from the National Weather Service. The first prong is improving the science. We know that we're never going to be 100% accurate, but we can get better. We can tighten up our false alarm ratios so that way, or tighten up those polygon areas so we're warning a smaller area and targeting specific areas, to where we're not over warning, or that we're getting better with getting the science right and accurate, and we're making improvements on that side. But there's also the prong of communication. And so many people are used to having that deterministic information handed to them, one number. But could we be providing a better service by providing probabilistic information rather than just one number? And by providing probabilistic information, that might seem overwhelming, but if you have the right tools, if you have the right education and the communication with it, you can actually use probabilistic information, tailor it to specific thresholds. Every community has their own threshold for what triggers flooding or what triggers issues. If you have the right tools available, you can utilize probabilistic information to help you make better and more informed decisions. But we are still a ways away from getting to that point. But I think there are so many different agencies and projects that are out there that are kind of getting us into that path. As long as we're all working together to get to that point, I think we will get there. It's just going to take a mindset change of how we're used to thinking and translating and communicating and even absorbing all of that information. Personally, I think it all comes down to trust. I think the communities have to trust the agencies that are working in these directions to come up with the right answers, and also patience to work with us, understand that we are going to have uncertainty until we can make strides in the right direction. So it's definitely a give and take on both ends, but I think all of that together will help us combat the uncertainty aspect.
Thank you, and thank you all for these great answers. I want to ask one more. There's potentially more. I also want to leave some time for questions from the audience. So for those of you in the audience, you'll be able to either raise your hand or put them in the chat, and you can start doing that if you like. And I kind of wanted to talk about action and kind of finish more on a positive note of what can be done. And so what I'm thinking about in particular is, in your opinion, what actions are needed, what steps can we take to really mitigate flood risk, and again, how to make sure, which has come up before in your answers, how do we ensure then once people have this information, they in fact act upon the information they receive. And I'm going to start with Francis, and then we go to Katie and Gabriela.
Okay. There's a lot that we can do to, to mitigate flooding. So, and I think we need to start getting prepared, building that kit, making sure that we have enough water, making sure that we have enough supplies in our homes, making sure that we have the important information from our loved ones, a meetup place in case we need to evacuate and we get separated. There's so much that we can do in order for us to prepare and be able to respond better to the flood risk and be able to mitigate flooding. But also we need to, as bad as the insurance is, expensive, we need to try to find a way so we could be able to have flood insurance, or have a plan. Do we have saved so we could be able to to support ourselves whenever that happens, if or not if, or maybe we should say when that happens, because it's gonna happen. Making sure that the city responds effectively. These standing orders that I've been trying to work, or we have been trying to work for so long, this is for everything to be in place. So there's that. I know whenever we go through a trauma, that everything is on our shoulders, and we have anxiety. We get all sorts of feelings because we are not able to respond the way that we want to when it's happening. But whenever we're prepared, it's a load off of our shoulders, and that peace that we have, that on top of all the flooding and dealing with the trauma, at least we don't have those things to deal with, because we know we already have our backpack ready. We already have the phone numbers that we need. We have the paperwork, maybe your pictures or things that you cherish, that you want to take with you. Just making sure that we learn, and as much as we can, about who to ask for support, what city department maybe is able to help you. How do you get to sign up for those warnings? Warn Central Texas or Ready Central Texas. How do I know where I live I get flooded? By going to Flood Pro, finding out, by putting my address. Do I live in a flood zone? So, all of these things are very important in mitigating. We're not mitigating the flood risk, but we're mitigating the danger, in making sure that our families stay safe. And of course, to mitigate the flooding, we can work with the city, ask them, meet with them, and have meetings on what is it that we can do on our part, and what can the city do, so we could have those projects moving. I know it takes about 7 to 10 years for a big flood mitigation, but what can we do in the meantime? Is there those small key wins, like clearing debris out of a flood area, or things like that the city can do in the meantime? Maybe cut the grass, that they can have periodically, so there's not a lot of like tall grass or logs or anything like that in the area, so more water could stay in the pond and not overflow. So there's so much that we can do to help mitigate those dangers. And of course, I think we need to be gentle to ourselves too, because many times we get consumed in the disaster and helping everybody else, that we carry everything in our hearts and in our heads, that at the end of the day, we end up not helping our families or not helping our neighbors, because we have taken so much on us. So, finding that support, and I'm trying to bring mental health like a normal thing that we can get for all of us, because if our mental health is not healthy, it's hard for us to be active in the community. So, yes, I think that's what I have.
Thank you, Francis. Katie?
Yeah, I was going to say, in addition to having a plan, part of that plan is recognizing the individual risk. And you kind of set me up for success, Francis, because you talk about knowing if you live in a floodplain, but that's not the only way that someone can be at a flood risk. Someone could be at a flood risk on their commute from home to work or from work to pick up their children. How many have to drive past a low water crossing every single day and don't recognize the risk? Most of our flood fatalities happen in vehicles and happen at night. How do we get people to recognize that that is a risk just as much as if you live in a floodplain, if not more? So making sure that individuals take ownership of knowing their flood risk, but also communities recognizing the flood risk. And then, of course, acting on that. How many times have we seen large trucks go around the barricades that have these roads blocked off? How do we prevent people from realizing that you're not the only one who those barricades don't need to be there for? And then part of that plan too is staying connected, making sure that you're getting the information, because everyone gets caught up in their own day-to-day actions, work, taking care of children, responsibilities that go outside of just checking the weather or checking the flood conditions. So making sure that you have a trusted source that you can fall back on and that you're staying connected to mitigate your own flood risk.
Thank you, Katie. And Gabriel.
Thank you, Paula. I'll just keep it very brief. And I think that the best thing I can say is that it takes a village. So we've heard from Francis at the community level, from Katie as far as the preparedness at the federal level. It's a really complex problem, and it's not going to be one that will solve in isolation or one that will solve overnight. And so I think we need to have the willingness to build the relationships to be able to accomplish this, the patience, because not everybody will move at the same pace, and the grace to recognize when maybe the time is not right, and maybe we need to check in at another point in time. Just because it works for us, it doesn't mean that it's going to work with everybody else. So those, without leaving some time for additional discussion, that's probably all I want to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Trust and patience, very important. So there's a couple of questions that I see. One is in the chat and one is in the Q&A. And I think the Q&A one was submitted first. I'm going to go with that one, but also I want to point the panelists to a question in the chat that asks for workshops or conferences that community members can attend for disaster preparedness. So maybe we can put some ideas in the chat. But in the meantime, I'm going to read the question in the Q&A, which is, have you found communication methods that bridge the so-called digital divide when warning residents of a flood or other danger when those residents may not have access to Twitter, Facebook, or internet in general? We have seen this happen many times during past events. So anybody who would like to take the question first?
I just want to say that we in GAVA, we train residents on how to anticipate, prepare, and respond to disasters. There's we have level 1, which is personal preparedness, and we also have community preparedness, which is teaching residents on how to organize within their neighborhood. How many homes do they want to support in their street or in their block, or things like that, making sure that their neighbors are safe, or if they need support, they can go to their neighbors, and vice versa.
Thank you, Francis. Katie.
Yeah, another thing that the National Weather Service has, we have the NOAA weather radio, which doesn't rely on internet or you don't need social media for it. It uses radio frequency, and that anytime a warning is issued for that specific area, that NOAA weather radio will go off, and it can be easily configurable. And if people need help with that, the local National Weather Service office can help people set those up in homes, in facilities, and even emergency managers and local officials can also help with that. So it's just a matter of making sure people are aware of that resource, and we are more than happy to help them get those set up.
Excellent. Gabriele, is there anything that you want to add? Otherwise, I'll go for the next question. I saw you shaking your head, so I'll read that one. You're good? Okay. As a follow-up to Francis' point about organizing within neighborhoods, what forms have those neighborhood organizations taken that have made them sustainable long-term rather than solely existing around the major disaster events? Yeah, it's very interesting. Who would like to take that? It is blue sky, so we don't think about flooding, but that's going to happen. So, Francis, is there any advice that you can share or something that has worked for you all?
I think it's when, like, for example, when I was sharing that I called residents to ensure that they were prepared. And, you know, it was very pleasing for me to know that they were already with their backpacks in their cars. They had already sent their children and their elder people out of the area. It's just making sure that residents are ready, because, and not to take it lightly. A lot of the times we think, no, it's not going to happen, right? It's not going to be a lot of water. It's not going to be, the water's not going to go to inside my house. And then we realize that it's going to be too late when the water reaches the edge of your door in your house. It's late already for you to get out. Now you have to shelter in place, which is staying home and hoping that the water doesn't rise too high that you are gonna need rescue. So it's, I think it's just being conscious that it could happen, and making sure that we follow those trainings that we have learned. You know, whenever somebody tells us, hey, make sure, you know, you already signed up for the weather alerts, and you keep getting, you know, those messages on your phone, on your emails, on the radio, you know, for people to stay away from flood waters, turn around, don't drown. All of these things that we keep hearing, that we don't take it lightly, and that we make sure that we act on the knowledge that we have received.
And that's true for other hazards as well, of course, for heating, for cold weather, or any extreme that we tend to get here. I know we're at time. Does any of the other panelists want to add anything to these answers?
Yeah, I'll just add real quick that what we have seen when we go out to do outreach events, so we do a National Weather Service Skywarn training or a flood aware training, it tends to lead communities to having more discussion, and it just keeps the conversation going. So the more you plan these outreach events, even on blue sky days, it keeps the conversation going, which helps to address specific problems that might not have been brought up at a previous outreach event.
Right, completely agree. Gabriele, anything else?
Yeah, I second everything that we've heard. The main thing is to go there humble enough with the idea that you can learn from the communities as far as solutions, what they know. Oftentimes we don't incorporate knowledge that comes from the community level, and so to me that's definitely part of it. And it's from an engineering perspective, we have a disaster, there is a big influx of funding, we go out in the community, we talk with them, we do something, then when the money runs dry, then we leave. And so when this keeps on happening over and over again, we have heard the word trust throughout the conversation, then it's really hard to say, no, but this time is different. May or may not be. And so It's a struggle. The question was about the long-term funding. I think that should be at the forefront of any initiatives, and ties back to the last question on how do we make sure that these situations that don't keep on happening over and over again. And so having the long-term view of the problem rather than just a patchwork might get us closer, both in terms of sustainability as well as in terms of long-term solutions. And
yeah, I completely agree. And thanks for addressing, partially address the last question that was submitted. So I know we're at time. I know we have some technical difficulties. We're gonna definitely fill the whole time talking about this, but as a reminder, these whole, series of roundtables is around water for Planet Texas 2050. So there will be more. And we're also going to have a symposium in February, and we actually just discussed yesterday the possibility of doing a panel that addresses this conflict between local and city scale solution and short-term versus long-term. So please stay tuned with that. Would love to have everyone attend our symposium as well. And with that, I want to thank our wonderful panelists for being here, for bringing in their perspectives on flooding, and for all of you for attending and just keeping the conversation going. And as we said, the sky is blue, but we know it's not going to be like this every day, and so we need to be prepared. And with that, thank you all for coming, and we hope to see you at the next roundtable.